the time Grace finally discovered the truth, 6 months had already passed. 6 months of living with a man she thought was a monster. 6 months of planning her escape. 6 months of having the husband her family had forced her to marry. But when she accidentally uncovered his secret, when she saw what he'd been hiding in that locked room every night, when she realized who this man truly was beneath the cold exterior he showed the world, everything she thought she knew shattered in an instant. Because her husband wasn't the cruel stranger she'd been told to fear. He was something else entirely. And the reason he'd agreed to this forced marriage, the reason he'd kept his distance, the reason he'd never touched her despite sharing a home. When Grace learned the truth, she realized that the man she'd spent 6 months despising was actually the one person who'd been protecting her all along. How does a woman go from hating her husband to discovering he's her guardian angel? And what secret could possibly turn a forced marriage into the greatest love story never told? To understand this, we need to go back to the day Grace's life was stolen from her. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments. Grace was 24 years old, a graduate student studying architecture at the University of Lagos, with dreams of designing buildings that would transform her city's skyline. She was independent, ambitious, and absolutely certain about the life she wanted to build. Marriage wasn't part of her plan. Not yet. Maybe in 5 years, maybe 10, when she'd established her career, when she'd found someone she actually loved. But her father had other ideas. Chief Akafor was a traditional man, wealthy and well-connected in their community. He believed daughters were meant to marry well, to form alliances between families, to secure their futures through advantageous matches. "You're 24, he told Grace one evening. "Your younger cousin is already married with a child. People are starting to talk." "Let them talk," Grace replied calmly. "I have my studies to finish, Papa. I have goals." "Your goal should be to settle down with a good man, and I've found one for you." Grace's blood ran cold. "What do you mean you found one?" "His name is Chike Ademi, 32 years old, very successful businessman from an excellent family. His father and I have known each other for years. It's a perfect match." "Papa, I don't want to get married. Not now, and definitely not to someone I don't know." "You'll get to know him after the wedding. That's how it works." "That's how it worked 50 years ago. This is the 21st century." "Don't raise your voice at me. I've made my decision. The families have agreed. The bride price has been negotiated. You'll marry Chike Ademi in 2 months. Grace felt her world crumbling. "Papa, please, I'm begging you. Don't do this to me." "I'm doing this for you. You don't understand now, but you will. This is how we protect our daughters, how we secure their futures. Chike is a good man from a good family. You should be grateful." "Grateful? You're selling me like property." Her father's face hardened. "Enough. The decision is made. You will respect it or you will lose your place in this family." Grace tried everything. She begged her mother, who could only offer sympathetic looks and whispered apologies. "Your father's mind is made up," her mother said sadly. "And the Ademi family is very powerful. It's a good match, Grace. Maybe you'll learn to love him." She tried talking to her aunts, her uncles, anyone who might intervene. But the family saw this as a triumph. The Ademis were one of the wealthiest families in Lagos. Their son marrying into the Akafor family elevated everyone's status. Nobody cared that Grace's dreams were being destroyed. Nobody cared that she was being forced into a life she didn't choose. 2 weeks before the wedding, Grace met Chike for the first time. Their families arranged a formal dinner at an expensive restaurant, and she sat across from the man who would become her husband, studying him with barely concealed resentment. Chike Ademi was tall, perhaps 6'2", with dark skin and sharp features. He was handsome in an austere way, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, but his eyes were cold, distant. He looked at Grace the way someone might look at a business transaction. Throughout dinner, he barely spoke. When he did, his voice was flat, emotionless. He asked no questions about her life, her interests, her dreams. He simply sat there, going through the motions of this arranged meeting like it was an obligation he couldn't wait to finish. "So, Chike," Grace said, unable to contain her frustration. Do you always let your family make your life decisions for you? Or is forcing someone into marriage a special hobby? Her father shot her a warning look, but Chike's expression didn't change. I do what's required, he said simply. And marrying a stranger against her will is required. Our families have made an agreement. I intend to honor it. How noble of you, and what about what I want? Does that factor into your honor? For the first time, something flickered in his eyes. Was it regret? Sympathy? But it vanished so quickly Grace couldn't be sure. I understand this isn't what you wanted, Chike said quietly, but it's happening regardless. We can make it difficult or we can make it bearable. The choice is yours. My choice was taken away the moment our fathers shook hands. Chike said nothing more, and when dinner ended, he left without a goodbye. The wedding day arrived like an execution. Grace wore a beautiful traditional iro and buba in ivory and gold, her hair styled elaborately, makeup perfect. She looked like a bride from a magazine, but inside, she felt like a prisoner walking to her cell. The ceremony was grand. Hundreds of guests, traditional dancers, a live band. Everyone celebrated the union of two important families. Everyone except the bride, who stood through it all with a frozen smile, dying inside. When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, when Chike lifted her veil and gave her a brief, perfunctory kiss, Grace felt something inside her shatter. This was her life now, married to a stranger, trapped. They moved into Chike's house, a massive modern property in Lekki, one of Lagos's most exclusive neighborhoods. It was beautiful, all glass and clean lines, with a pool and a garden and more rooms than two people could ever need. It felt like a prison. This is your home now, Chike said, showing her around. The master bedroom is upstairs. You'll stay there. I've moved my things to the guest room down the hall. Grace blinked in surprise. We're not sharing a room. I thought you'd prefer it that way. She didn't know how to respond. Part of her was relieved. The thought of sharing a bed with this cold stranger had terrified her. But another part was confused. What kind of marriage was this? The house staff will help you with anything you need, Chike continued. I'm usually at work until late. I won't disturb you. And that's how their marriage began. They lived in the same house but existed in separate worlds. Chike left early every morning and returned late every night. When they did cross paths, their interactions were polite but minimal. He never tried to touch her, never tried to act like a real husband. He was like a distant roommate who happened to share her last name. Grace should have been grateful. Instead, she felt confused and increasingly curious. What kind of man agrees to a forced marriage and then ignores his wife completely? What was Chike hiding? She tried calling her best friend, Enkachai, to vent her frustration. At least he's leaving you alone, Enkachai said. That's better than the alternative. I know, but it's strange. He doesn't even look at me. It's like I'm furniture. Maybe he's gay, and this marriage is his family's way of covering it up. Maybe, but he doesn't seem. I don't know. There's something else going on. Like what? I don't know, but I'm going to find out. Grace started paying closer attention to her husband's patterns. He left at 7 every morning, dressed in expensive suits, carrying a briefcase. He returned around 11 or midnight, looking exhausted. And then he'd disappear into his room, locking the door behind him. But twice a week, on Wednesdays and Saturdays, he'd stay in his room all evening with the door locked. She could hear sounds from inside, muffled voices, sometimes what sounded like children laughing or crying. Was he watching videos, having video calls, with whom? One Wednesday night, about 3 months into their marriage, Grace's curiosity got the better of her. She crept down the hallway and pressed her ear against Chike's door. She could hear his voice, soft and gentle, completely different from the cold tone he used with her. That's right, good job. You're doing so well, I'm so proud of you. A child's voice responded, though Grace couldn't make out the words. I know it's hard, Chike continued, but you're the bravest person I know. Just a little longer, okay? I promise I'll be there this weekend. Was Chike talking to a child? His child? Did he have a family he'd hidden from everyone? Grace's mind raced with possibilities, each more dramatic than the last. Was this why he'd agreed to the arranged marriage? To hide a secret family? Was he paying someone off? Was he involved in something illegal? She tried asking him directly the next morning at breakfast. "Chike, can I ask you something?" He looked up from his coffee. "What is it?" "Do you have children?" His expression didn't change, but she saw his hand tighten slightly around his cup. "Why are you asking?" "I heard you talking to someone last night. It sounded like a child." "That's none of your concern." "We're married. How is it not my concern?" "This is a marriage in name only, Grace. We both know that. You have your life, I have mine. Let's keep it that way." He stood up and left before she could respond. But Grace couldn't let it go. Something about the gentleness in Chike's voice when he talked to that child haunted her. There was warmth there, emotion, humanity, the complete opposite of how he was with her. Who was this man really, and why was he hiding? 4 months into the marriage, Grace's father called to check on her. "How is married life?" Chief Okafor asked. "It's fine, Papa," she lied. "Chike is treating you well." "Yes, Papa." "Good. The Adamus are a good family. You were lucky to marry into them." After the call ended, Grace felt anger rising in her chest. Lucky? She was trapped in a house with a man who barely acknowledged her existence. How was that lucky? She decided to do something she'd been considering for weeks. She'd investigate Chike's background, find out what he was hiding, and use it to negotiate her freedom. If he had secrets, maybe she could leverage them to get out of this marriage. Grace started researching online. She found articles about the Adami family's business empire, about Chike's father's political connections, about their various charitable foundations, but nothing about Chike himself. He seemed to live off the grid, avoiding publicity, keeping a low profile. Then she found something interesting. An old newspaper article from 8 years ago about a scholarship program for underprivileged children. The program was funded by an anonymous donor, but the article mentioned it was administered through one of the Adami family foundations. Could that be connected to the child Chike talked to? Grace kept digging. She found more articles about various charitable programs, all connected to the Adami name, all focused on helping children. Orphanages, schools, medical programs. And then she found a photo. It was from a charity event 5 years ago. In the background, barely visible, was a man who looked like Chike, standing with a group of children at what appeared to be a hospital. Grace zoomed in on the photo. It was definitely him, younger but unmistakable. And the way he was looking at those children, with such tenderness and care, was completely at odds with the cold man she lived with. Who was Chike Adami really? One Saturday evening, about 5 months into their marriage, everything changed. Chike had locked himself in his room as usual. Grace could hear him talking, that same gentle voice she'd heard before. But this time, the child's voice on the other end sounded distressed. I know, Chike was saying. "It hurts, I'm sorry, but the doctors say you're getting better, you're so strong." The child started crying, and Grace heard something in Chike's voice break. "Please don't cry, you're breaking my heart. I wish I could be there right now. I wish I could take away the pain. But I promise, this weekend I'm coming to visit and we'll have the best day ever, okay? We'll do whatever you want." More crying from the child. "I love you too, so much. You're going to beat this, I know you are. You're a fighter. Now try to get some rest, okay? I'll call you tomorrow." When the call ended, Grace heard something that shocked her to her core. She heard Chike crying. This cold, distant man was sobbing behind his locked door, and the sound was heartbreaking. Grace stood frozen in the hallway, her hand over her mouth. Whatever was happening, whoever that child was, this wasn't what she'd imagined. This wasn't an affair or a secret family. This was something else, something that caused Chike real pain. The next morning, Grace watched Chike carefully at breakfast. He looked exhausted, his eyes slightly red, but his expression was as neutral as ever. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly. "I'm fine." "You don't look fine. You look tired." I said, "I'm fine, Grace. Please drop it." But she couldn't. "Chike, whatever you're dealing with, whatever's going on, maybe I could help. If you just talk to me." He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw something flicker in his eyes. Longing, hope, but then he shook his head. "You can't help. Nobody can." "How do you know if you won't tell me what's wrong?" "Because this is my burden to carry, not yours. You didn't ask for this marriage any more than I did. You shouldn't have to deal with my problems on top of everything else." It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to her. "Maybe I want to help," Grace said softly. Chike stood up. "I appreciate that, but no. Now if you'll excuse me, I have somewhere to be." He left, and Grace made a decision. She was going to follow him. She waited until his car pulled out of the driveway, then called an Uber. "Follow that black Mercedes," she told the driver, feeling ridiculous but determined. They drove for 40 minutes, leaving the wealthy neighborhoods behind, moving into a more modest area of the city. Finally, Chike's car pulled up to a building that Grace recognized from her research. It was a children's hospital, one funded by the Adami Family Foundation. Grace got out and watched from a distance as Chike entered the building. He was carrying a large bag, and his entire demeanor had changed. The cold mask was gone, replaced by something softer, more human. She waited a few minutes, then followed him inside. The hospital was clean but basic, filled with children in various stages of illness. Grace stopped at the reception desk. "Excuse me," she said to the nurse. "I'm looking for someone, a man who just came in, tall, carrying a large bag." The nurse smiled. "Oh, you mean Mr. Chike? He's in the oncology ward. Are you family?" "Oncology, cancer." "I'm his wife," Grace said, the words feeling strange but necessary. The nurse's face lit up. "His wife? Oh, we didn't know he was married. He never mentioned it. He's with the children now. You can go up, 3rd floor, room 304. Grace's heart was pounding as she took the elevator to the 3rd floor. The oncology ward. Chike was visiting children with cancer. Was one of them his? She found room 304 and stopped in the doorway, completely unprepared for what she saw. The room was full of children, ranging from about 5 to maybe 12 years old. Some were bald from chemotherapy. Some were thin and frail. All of them looked sick, but all of them were smiling because Chike was there. He was sitting on the floor, surrounded by kids, pulling toys and books out of his bag. His face was transformed by the biggest smile Grace had ever seen. He was laughing with the children, making them giggle, completely unlike the man she'd been living with. Mr. Chike brought presents. One little girl squealed. "I promised I would," Chike said, handing her a doll. "And I always keep my promises." A small boy, maybe 7 years old, hugged Chike tightly. "I missed you." "I missed you too, David. How are you feeling this week?" "Better. The medicine makes me tired, but I'm fighting like you told me to." "That's my boy. You're the strongest kid I know." Grace watched, tears streaming down her face, as Chike spent the next 2 hours with these children. He read them stories. He played games with them. He listened to each one talk about their week, their fears, their hopes. And with every child, he was present, attentive, loving. This was who Chike really was, not the cold stranger she'd married. But this warm, compassionate man who gave his Saturdays to children fighting for their lives. A nurse appeared beside Grace. "You must be the wife," she said quietly. "I'm Nurse Grace. I've worked in this ward for 10 years, and I've never seen anyone like Mr. Chike. He's been coming here for 8 years, every single Saturday without fail. He pays for treatments, brings gifts, spends time with every child. Some of these kids have been abandoned by their own families, but Mr. Chike never abandons them." "Why?" Grace whispered. "Why does he do this?" Nurse Grace's face grew sad. "He had a younger sister, Ada. She died of leukemia when she was 9 years old. Mr. Chike was only 14 at the time. He's told me that he felt helpless watching her suffer, unable to do anything. So now he does everything he can for other children fighting the same battle. He funds their treatments, provides emotional support, shows them they're not alone." Everything suddenly made sense. The locked door, The phone calls, the exhaustion, the emotional walls. He never told me, Grace said. He doesn't tell many people. I think the grief is still too raw, even after all these years. And now, with his family pressuring him to marry, to move on with his life, as they put it, he's been more withdrawn than ever. They forced him into our marriage. I suspected as much. Mr. Chaik mentioned he was getting married but didn't seem happy about it. I think his family doesn't understand why he spends so much time here instead of focusing on business and family obligations. They see it as dwelling on the past. But this is how he honors his sister. Exactly, by saving other children. Grace watched Chaik help a little girl who was struggling to walk, holding her hand gently, encouraging her with every step. And she felt her heart crack open. This man she'd spent 5 months resenting, this stranger she'd been forced to marry, was one of the most beautiful human beings she'd ever encountered. And she'd been too blind to see it. "Does he know I'm here?" Grace asked. "Not yet. Would you like me to tell him?" "No, let him finish with the children. I'll wait." Grace spent the next hour watching Chaik interact with the children. She saw how each child lit up when he spoke to them, how he knew all their names, their stories, their favorite things, how he made them feel special and loved and seen. Finally, when visiting hours ended and the children were being settled back into their beds, Chaik stood up and turned toward the door. He froze when he saw Grace standing there. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Then Chaik walked over, his expression unreadable. "How long have you been here?" he asked quietly. "Long enough. I can explain." "You don't have to. Nurse Grace told me about Ada, about why you do this." Chaik's jaw tightened. "Then you understand why I couldn't tell you, why I couldn't let you into this part of my life." "Actually, I don't understand. Why keep it secret? This is beautiful, Chaik. What you're doing here is incredible." "Because everyone who knows about it tries to make me stop. My parents think I'm obsessed with the past. They think I need to move on, focus on the future, on building my own family. They arranged our marriage because they thought a wife would pull me away from here, make me normal again. That's why you keep your distance from me." "Yes, if I let you in, if I let myself care about you, about our marriage. Then I'd have less time for them." He gestured toward the ward. "These kids don't have anyone else. I can't abandon them." "Who said you have to choose?" Chaik looked at her confused. "What? Why can't you have both? A real marriage and this work you do?" "Because marriage requires time, attention, emotional energy. Everything I have goes to these children. It wouldn't be fair to you." Grace stepped closer. "Chaik, I spent 5 months hatting you because I thought you were cold and uncaring. But now I see the truth. You're the most caring person I've ever met. You're just directing all that care here instead of at home." "I'm sorry. You deserved better than what I gave you." "Maybe, but what if we could start over? What if instead of living like strangers, we tried to actually be partners? I could help you here. I could be part of this work instead of separate from it." "Why would you want that?" "Because I was wrong about you. Because what you're doing matters. Because maybe this forced marriage doesn't have to be a prison for either of us. Maybe it could be something else." Chaik studied her face, searching for something. "You really mean that?" "I do, but I need you to be honest with me. Tell me about Ada. Tell me about these children. Let me in, Chaik, please." They sat in the hospital cafeteria for 3 hours while Chaik told her everything. About his sister Ada, who'd been his best friend, who'd fought leukemia for 2 years before losing the battle. About his guilt for being healthy while she suffered. About his promise to her, whispered on her deathbed, that he'd help other children like her. "For 8 years I've kept that promise," Chaik said. "Every Saturday without fail, but it's never enough. Kids still die, kids still suffer, and I can't save them all." "You can't save them all," Grace agreed gently. "But you can love them all, and that matters more than you know." Chaik's eyes filled with tears. "I've never told anyone that before, about the promise, about the guilt." "You don't have to carry it alone anymore." "Grace, I need you to understand something. These children will always be my priority. If that's not something you can accept—" "I accept it, But you need to understand something too. I'm not asking you to choose between them and me. I'm asking you to let me stand beside you. Let me help. Let me be your wife for real, not just on paper. Why would you want that? You never wanted this marriage. I didn't want a forced marriage to a stranger, but you're not a stranger anymore. And maybe what we could build together is worth more than what I originally planned for my life. Chaik reached across the table and took her hand. It was the first time he'd touched her in 5 months. Are you sure? I'm sure. The next Saturday, Grace went with Chaik to the hospital. She brought her own bag of gifts and art supplies, and she spent the day getting to know the children. They were wary at first, protective of their special relationship with Mr. Chaik, but Grace's genuine kindness won them over. Is this your girlfriend? Little David asked Chaik. This is my wife, Grace. You got married. When? A few months ago. Does she know about us? She does now, and she wants to be part of our family here. David looked at Grace seriously. Mr. Chaik is very important to us. You have to be nice to him. I will, Grace promised, and I hope you'll be nice to me too. Okay, do you know how to play checkers? I do. Good, Mr. Chaik always lets me win. Maybe you'll actually try. Grace laughed and sat down to play with him, and across the room, she caught Chaik watching her with an expression she'd never seen before. It looked like hope. Over the following weeks, Grace and Chaik's relationship transformed. They started talking, really talking about everything. Their hopes, their fears, their pasts. Chaik told her about growing up as the perfect son, always meeting his parents' expectations except for his insistence on honoring Ada's memory. Grace told him about her architectural dreams, about feeling suffocated by her father's traditional expectations. We were both trapped, Chaik said one evening as they sat in the garden. Both forced into lives we didn't choose. But maybe we can choose what happens next, Grace replied. What do you want to happen? I want to finish my degree. I want to design buildings, but I also want to help you with the children. I've been thinking, what if we designed a better space for them? A healing center that's bright and cheerful instead of institutional. Chaik's eyes lit up. You do that? I'd love to, if you'll let me. Grace, I'd be honored. They started spending their Saturdays together at the hospital. Grace would sketch designs for a new children's wing while Chaik played with the kids. They'd have lunch with Nurse Grace and discuss treatment plans and fundraising ideas. And slowly, the hospital staff started calling them the couple, and the children started asking when they'd bring their own kids to visit. Not yet, Grace would laugh. Let's see how this marriage thing goes first. But privately, she was starting to imagine a future with Chaik. A real future. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. 6 months into their marriage, Grace and Chaik had dinner with both their families. Chief Akaffer and Mr. Adami were pleased to see them sitting close together, holding hands, looking like a real couple. I'm glad you two worked things out, Chief Akaffer said. Grace, you look happier. I'm happy, Papa. Marriage suits you. Grace glanced at Chaik, who squeezed her hand. It does, but not for the reasons you think. After dinner, Chaik's parents pulled him aside. We're so relieved, his mother said. We were worried you'd never move past Ada's death, but having Grace in your life seems to have helped. You're spending less time at that hospital, yes? Actually, no, Chaik said firmly. I'm spending the same amount of time there, but now Grace comes with me. She's designing a new children's wing. His father frowned. Chaik, we've talked about this. You need to focus on the business, on building your own family. I am building a family, with Grace, and part of that family includes the children at the hospital. That's not going to change. But, no, this isn't up for discussion anymore. I've spent 8 years doing what you wanted, hiding this part of my life, pretending to be the son you wanted me to be. But I'm done hiding. Ada was my sister. Those children are part of who I am, and if you can't accept that, then we have a problem. Grace stood beside him. Mr. and Mrs. Adami, what Chaik does at that hospital is remarkable. He's saving lives, giving hope to children who have nothing. You should be proud of him, not trying to make him stop. We just want him to have a normal life, his mother said. This is his normal life, and it's beautiful. Please don't take it away from him. There was a long silence. Then Mr. Adami sighed. I suppose we've been unfair. We thought we were protecting you, Chike, but maybe we were just trying to protect ourselves from the grief. I know, Dad, and I understand, but I need you to understand too. This is how I honor Ada, and I'm never going to stop. Then we won't ask you to, his mother said quietly. But please, just promise us you'll take care of yourself too, and take care of your wife. I will, I promise. Later that night, as they drove home, Grace turned to Chike. Thank you for standing up for what matters. Thank you for standing beside me. Always. 1 year after their forced marriage, Grace and Chike stood together at the groundbreaking ceremony for the new children's wing. It was designed to be bright and colorful, with large windows, play areas, and healing gardens. The design had won an architectural award, launching Grace's career in a way she'd never imagined. But more than that, it represented everything they'd built together. A partnership, a purpose, a love that had grown from the most unlikely circumstances. I never thought I'd say this, Grace told Chike as they watched construction begin, but I'm grateful our families forced us together. Really? Yes, because otherwise I never would have found you, the real you, and I never would have found this. She gestured at the hospital, at the children watching excitedly from the windows. This purpose, this family. I'm grateful too. You turned my prison into a home. We turned each other's prisons into homes. They stood there holding hands, watching their dream take shape, and Grace marveled at how wrong she'd been about everything. She thought this marriage would be her cage. Instead, it had been her wings. Because sometimes the person you're forced to marry turns out to be the person you were meant to find all along. Sometimes what looks like a curse is actually a blessing in disguise. And sometimes the coldest stranger becomes the warmest love you've ever known. 2 years later, Grace and Chike welcomed their first child, a daughter. They named her Ada, after the sister who'd started it all. And every Saturday, they brought her to the hospital, where she grew up surrounded by her extended family of children who fought and healed and loved. And when little Ada was old enough to ask why they spent so much time at the hospital, Grace and Chike told her the truth. About the sister who'd died. About the promise that was kept. About how sometimes love finds you in the most unexpected places, even in marriages you never wanted. So you didn't want to marry Daddy? Ada asked, confused. Not at first, Grace admitted. But then I discovered who he really was, and everything changed. What did you discover? Grace looked at her husband, who was across the room reading to a group of sick children, his daughter's namesake watching over him from heaven. I discovered that the best things in life are often the ones we never knew we needed. I discovered that forced beginnings can lead to chosen forevers. And I discovered that your father is the best man I've ever known. I could have told you that, Ada said seriously. Daddy's the best. Yes, he is, and I'm very lucky he's mine. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Because this story teaches us that first impressions can be devastatingly wrong, that the coldest exteriors sometimes hide the warmest hearts, that forced beginnings don't determine final endings, and that real love isn't about perfection or romance or fairy tale meetings. It's about discovering who someone truly is beneath the masks they wear and choosing to stand beside them anyway. Subscribe to Reality Folktales for more powerful stories about unexpected love, hidden depths, and the transformations that happen when we open our hearts to possibility. And remember, the person you're forced to know might become the person you choose to love. Sometimes our greatest blessings come disguised as our worst nightmares. And sometimes, just sometimes, arranged marriages arrange themselves into beautiful, chosen love stories.